All right. Hey guys, it's been a minute. I know we've been away. The Rob Nelson live show it's been a busy time. Let's face it, the world is falling apart, reordering itself. We have got a war. I mean, did you notice that COVID went away? COVID went away overnight, not overnight, but over like 10 days. I mean, COVID was here, and then suddenly, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, politics screamed loud and clear, and everyone was like, we better get rid of our mandates, because if we don't, we're going to lose votes. And all the mandates went away. And, progressively, I'm in Puerto Rico. They literally just lifted them today. It's the final one. Everybody's lifted their mandates. No more vaccine mandates, no more mask mandates. But then Ukraine was invaded by Russia, and literally COVID went away. There's like one story like buried down in CNN about COVID every day. Like it's literally overnight. The pandemic was here, and then it was gone. And I'm being a little facetious, but I'm not. It's what happened. We really had a pandemic at one point. We had a real crisis, and then they just dragged it out and kept it going. And no matter what happened, it was still bad. I mean, now it's Omicron, and everybody's getting it, and vaccines aren't stopping you from spreading or getting it, but everyone's still wearing masks, and you still have to be vaccinated. And then, oops, bad news in politics. Maybe we should lift these mandates, and then boom, a war starts, and the world goes kaboom, and there's no more COVID. Nobody even talks about it, except in Puerto Rico, because they only lifted the mandates today. All right, but let's get to the real issue, a war. And it is amazing that COVID could kind of disappear overnight when you think about it. Like no one's really thinking about it because we're thinking about something else. And even that, most people maybe aren't thinking about as much as they should. And I'll tell you why. But let's face it, there's a war, and this is not just any old war. Russia invades. I mean, they call it a special military operation. I mean, how much propaganda can you actually get away with? Well, a lot, right? We've seen how much you can propagandize things. I've argued for the last couple of years, we've been increasingly becoming kind of a propaganda-like machine in our own country where, depending on where you sit, both sides, but in this case, since Democrats are in control of the government, the messaging is, and the media kind of aligns with them for the most part, the messaging is whatever they want. Well, you see that in Russia, right? It's a special military operation. Can we be clear? It is not a special military operation. When you put like half your armed forces, and you have one of the biggest armed forces in the world, and you invade a neighboring country and start bombing the shit out of everyone and everything, I don't think that's a special military operation. I think that's called an all-out invasion. In fact, it is the biggest land invasion in Europe since World War II. I don't know how you get away with calling that a special military operation. It is an all-out assault of an epic proportion we haven't seen in Europe in 70 plus years. And that's just on the surface of how disruptive this is. And I'm talking about the politics before I get to the humanitarian side. And I'm going to just talk about the politics just for a second, and then because at the end of the day, the worst part of war is the humanitarian side. And we've never seen a war up close like this, where the entire world could watch and be affected and engaged at a visceral, minute-by-minute human level. It has become a humanized war like we've never seen. I mean, imagine if in World War II, people could have seen what we see now. It would change everything. And we've seen skirmishes, and we've seen pictures, and you see a fighting here. But this, we see an all-out war happening on a globally watching an all-out war happening. As Putin, I'm not going to run through the whole history of the whole thing, right? But basically, there's two eastern provinces of Ukraine that Putin sort of claimed always should have been his, and argued they were having insurrection and they were hurting the Russian people there, and that was a pretext for moving in and then just head on to take over Ukraine. Let's be honest. You don't need to understand all the geopolitics of this. The pretexts don't matter. I will give you the 60-second, all you need to know. Ukraine and Russia have been sister countries forever, way before the Soviet Union. They've been a sister countries. Most people in Russia know someone in Ukraine and vice versa. Many people in Russia have family in Ukraine and vice versa. They're literally, it's closer than the US and Canada. It's way more integrated. So forever, right? Putin has viewed Ukraine as part of Russia. Literally almost like in a state, almost like California to the US or any big state, New York, Texas. I'm picking states that want to be separate, but at times. But I'm saying it would be like California saying we're not a state, and the rest of the U.S. was like, no, you are. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's how Putin looks at Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine have been sister aligned forever. So in Putin's eyes, Ukraine is part of Russia, period, full stop. I'm not justifying Putin for a second here. I'm explaining the rationale of why he's like, I'm taking that back. And the short version answer of why that mattered is because he got scared that Ukraine was going to join NATO and become part of the Western alliance. And that terrified Putin. So he's like, first of all, I want it. Second of all, I'm scared they're going to go move closer to the West. They've already becoming democratic over the last 10 years. I got to take this back. And boom, in he goes. I don't know when people say they didn't see it coming. You could see it coming a mile off. You could have seen this coming 10 years ago. Putin's been planning to do this eventually for a decade, if not more, maybe 15 years. Putin wants Ukraine. The problem is Putin doesn't just want Ukraine. Putin wants to rebuild, not the Soviet Union like some people say. He wants to rebuild the pre-Soviet Union Russian monarchy, the Peter the Great Empire. He wants that back. And that means a whole lot of Europe. If you think Putin's just out to get one country, think again. Putin is, and I'm going to say he's a bit of a madman. He's on a mission. He wants to be remembered as the greatest Russian leader who reclaimed the Russian Empire. And Ukraine was the first step. In a few minutes, I will spin back and address why politically there's kind of a quagmire here and what triggered all this. But let's just be clear. Putin isn't willing to give up getting this country back. And he figured he could get away with it. I mean, we just watched Biden botch the Afghanistan withdrawal. He was like, yeah, you know what? They're not even going to take care of their own people. They're not even going to get all their people out of a country that they're in. They bail their troops out, leave their equipment behind, leave their allies. They ain't going to do crap when we go in and take Ukraine. And neither is the rest of Western Europe. They're all a bunch of wussies. They're all dependent on us for energy. They're all scared of any kind of conflict. We're going to go in. We'll have Ukraine in a week. We'll topple the government. It'll be ours. And everyone will yell and scream and it'll be all over. Wrong. There was this little thing called the Ukrainian people, a people fiercely independent, unlike the Russian people who are very much like kind of used to a monarchy, used to somebody telling what to do, you know, an autocratic presidential dictator for 20 years. Ukrainians are like seriously independent. They're a little bit libertarian, like anti-authoritarian. They're like, no way are you taking our country from us. No effing way are you coming in and doing this. How many troops, how many tanks, how many planes you have? Think again, Vladimir. We are going to stand up and stop you. No one in the world thought they would. They thought they're just going to rush in and roll over them. And what did the Ukrainian people do? They stood up and they fought back. They fought back with inferior arms, inferior weapons, inferior defense systems, inferior numbers of soldiers. They fought back with literally less than Russia had by 3 times. But they fought back. And 2 weeks later, they're still fighting back. And what they did is provoke and inspire an entire world to wake up and pay attention and go, look at these people fighting. You know, we sit here and talk about how our democracy is in trouble and whatever because January 6th, and our democracy was never in trouble. Our democracy is fine and solid. This is a democracy in trouble. This is an entire country, a democratically elected country, watching another nation literally roll in the biggest invasion since World War II and literally try to stomp them into the ground. And they are like, no, we are fighting for the soul of our country and our people. And they are led by the most unlikely of people, President Zelensky, who, if you don't know, became famous because he was a comedian. He did stand-up, you know. He was a stand-up comedian who that was an actor, would do romantic comedies, and then became the star of a Ukrainian sort of satirical sitcom political show called Savior of the State. Am I getting that wrong? In which he plays a president fighting a beleaguered, corrupted government, and he kind of, he's like, you know, it's literally the story of the show is a guy who becomes president. He's like an actor who becomes president because he's sick of the corruption and then leads the country out of it. In like life mimicking art, Zelensky is an actor who does that and runs for president. He runs for president on a campaign of like, I'm sick of the corruption. He's not a politician. He wouldn't even go to debates. The guy was like, I ain't going to debates. I ain't going to play this game. He kept doing his comedy show. He kept taking his show around the country and people loved it. And he got elected. And then you remember the Donald Trump thing and the phone call and the impeachment and the whole thing. Okay, cut to nobody took Zelensky seriously. Nobody thought he was all that much. And Ukraine's a terribly corrupt country. And he got in to try to fight that corruption. And most people thought you can't fight that corruption. It's impossible. X86BSD, 100% doesn't mean instant loss. And in fact, it means the opposite if you're willing to fight. And I will acknowledge it's not just their passion and their spirit. They know their country. They know their terrain. It's urban warfare. But you can't win that stuff if you're not willing to fight. And one of the first things that happened, the transformation of Zelensky from an actor who became a politician and was like, oh, all right, to, I would argue, literally, I saw an article, Charlie Chaplin to Winston Churchill. I mean, he literally has emerged as not just a guy playing a role or sitting in office. He has become literally an iconic force to fight for democracy. It's not an act. If you think he's acting, think again. I want to show you a clip of President Zelensky sitting inside the presidential palace, speaking to the European Parliament. They're sitting there in their suits and ties, safe and sound in the European Parliament. He's in a combat shirt in the presidential palace. And listen to the translator who breaks down, chokes up in tears trying to translate what he's saying. Can we play that?
Just for our land and for our freedom, despite the fact that all large cities of our country are now blocked, nobody is going to enter and intervene with our freedom and country. And believe you me, every square of today, no matter what it's called, it's going to be called, as today, Freedom Square in every city of our country. Nobody's going to break us. We're strong. We're Ukrainians. We have a desire to see our children alive. I think it's a fair one.
Vladimir Zelensky, again, if you watch him, if any of you doubt for a second he's serious, every time a country's getting crushed, what do? You take the leadership out and put them in exile. It's the first thing they do. They get out, they justify, they have to form a government in exile so that they can continue to exist once the oppressive invading power takes over. It always struck me as a cop-out with a rationale. Zelensky could have left. The U.S. offered him an off-ramp. We will get you out. We will put you up. You will form a government in exile. You will be safe and you can run the resistance government. What did Zelensky say? He tweeted, because everybody tweets. He tweeted, I don't need a ride out. I need ammunition. The guy is like, I am here. I am fighting. He goes out in the streets and drinks coffee with his soldiers. He's like, I'm fighting. I'm fighting with my people. You think that guy's not number one likely to die? They're trying to kill him, take him out. The Russians know, Putin knows, if we kill Zelensky, we chop the heart out of this movement. But Zelensky's sitting right there. I'm not going anywhere. And then he tweeted the other day after they tried to kill him like 4 times. He's like, I'm right here. Here's where I'm at. You can see I'm not hiding. I'm not hiding. Like the guy is like balls to the wall. I'm fighting. That takes human courage that few people don't have. It takes political courage as well. He's realized in a moment of time, like he becomes the face, the voice, the fight for his democracy. But I would argue to fight for all democracy. Because if you think this is just about the Ukraine, and at a humanitarian level, it's horrible. Yeah, Putin's bombing hospitals, for God's sakes. FYI, a sidebar to CNN, sick of your BS, how you cover stuff, ran a story after the hospital was bombed saying it is alleged that Russia bombed the hospital. I'm sorry. I'm going to go off on my CNN rant for 30 seconds, but you guys managed to say anything and everything is a fact when you want it to be a fact, but now it's just alleged that Russia bombed the hospital. I'm sorry, which part was alleged? That the Ukrainians blew their own hospital up? And now 2 days later, they're willing to say it wasn't alleged. But it just pissed me off at the time. I'm like, can you just say you're willing to call things facts all the time? But when it's the hospital being bombed by the Russians, and it's a maternity hospital, for God's sake, and they bombed it, and there are people injured and wounded and horrifying, and you see images of it, and they alleged. But anyway, that's beside the point. Putin is not just doing a normal war. He's not just attacking targets. He's attacking civilians. He's closing off corridors for people to get out. He's attacking infrastructure. He's attacking hospitals. He's going after schools. He's literally breaking every rule of war there is because he wants to crush the Ukrainian people. And he's willing to break every rule and lie through his teeth about it. Oh, they did it. They said it. He's already planting the seeds. He said there's biological weapons in Ukraine that we, the U.S., have been working on. I see. Now we're making new biological weapons in Ukraine. That's a pretext for if he decides to use biological weapons to say, I didn't use them. They're biological weapons that Ukraine had. They used them. It's so twisted and sick. It goes beyond war crimes. It's like it is evil upon evil. And I'm sorry, but Putin is an example of human evil. He may be rational in his mission and why he's doing it. And he may justify his reasons in his own nationalistic way. Same way people might have said Trump was. But he's evil. He's evil, and what he's doing is evil. It goes beyond just territorial acquisition and imperialism. He's willing to wipe out another people in order to get what he wants. Unfortunately for him, we're all watching, and the whole world has reacted. The whole world has viscerally reacted and said, no, you don't. And Putin never saw that coming. Putin never saw the resistance, never saw a global resistance. We've never seen anything like it, you guys. This isn't just sanctions. We started with sanctions. We're going to sanction you here. We're going to sanction the banks. That was like the baby steps. And it really meant nothing. Oh, we're going to freeze assets. Okay, but we're not going to touch oil and energy, which is Putin's main source, Russia's main source. We'll go after that. But suddenly it triggered from one thing to the next. And suddenly you had people all over the country. You had companies pulling out. McDonald's is like, we're out. Coca-Cola's we're. McDonald's built Russia's, capitalistic like system. McDonald's is out. Coca-Cola's out. One company after another. Starbucks is out. Big corporations are pulling out. Big energy companies are pulling out. Citicorp is pulling out. Goldman Sachs, banks are pulling out. Meanwhile, countries are like, we won't compete with you in sports. The Met gets rid of their Russian star. It's like, we will punish you. Now, I'm not saying the Russian people deserve to be punished. They're being punished by living under Putin already. But at a certain level, you got to choke the head of the snake, right? You got to get it, right? And Putin survives on being allowed to get away with his thing because he knows that everyone's scared of him. Well, which brings me to the issue of how much are we willing to fight? How much do you think this is worth to you? Well, not very much to most people, I would say. I mean, we give lip service like we do to most things, but we held out. Our own government didn't want to sanction oil and gas imports. Russia's energy sector is what it thrives on. John McCain used to say, Russia is a gas station posing as a country. Energy exports are everything to Russia. And the European Union is highly dependent on them. The U.S. not so much, 10, 15%, but we still get a lot. We took a long time to agree to ban imports. And Europe still hasn't fully done it. But let's be honest. If you care about what Putin's doing, you have to close off the thing that matters most, energy. You have to strangle the thing that matters most. We're finally doing it. Putin, Europe, not yet. And that's a bad thing for Europe. Because if people don't realize, again, I'm going to argue that on a moral level, we talk about standing for democracy. We talk about fighting for it. In our own country, people protest. Black Lives Matter, voting rights. Well, okay, guys, that's all good and important. I'm not diminishing it. It's real. But you've got a country now, a democracy, a true democracy, being crushed in a total violent, invasion, totally unjustified. And if you stand by and watch that, well, you're no different than other people standing by and watching any other atrocity. It's no different, just because it doesn't affect you today. And Europe especially can say, well, we want to be careful. Europe, you're next. If you think Putin's stopping if you think he's done at Ukraine, you're wrong. He's going to just keep pushing the ball farther and farther and farther. Putin has restructured the post-Cold War era with this invasion. We've never seen anything like it. XB86BSD. You know, cutting off SWIFT was a good move. I'll agree. And I want to get into the details of it. SWIFT's a financial transaction system and allows banks to talk to each other. So transactions can't really be done internationally without it. But just cutting off SWIFT didn't really do much. I'll be honest. Russia's central bank can still function without SWIFT. Now, we finally started to cut Russia's central bank off partly from SWIFT, and that did affect companies. I'd agree, and force them to pull out. I'm in favor of every sanction we've done. But we needed to do more. We needed to actually do energy, which we've done, and Europe does too. And my point is, if Europe thinks that they're safe from this, you're wrong. Putin has figured out the game, which is if I invade, I've got nuclear weapons. And the whole premise of mutually assured destruction is I have weapons, you have weapons, you don't use ours, you don't use yours, I don't use mine, and nobody dies. If you use yours, ours go off automatically, we all die. Mutually assured destruction. What Putin realized is I can do whatever I want, and I'll just be a bully and threaten that if anybody gets in my way, I'll use nuclear weapons. And that's what he's done. He's literally said, if anybody steps in the way of this, puts any military effort in the way, no-fly zone, anything, the world will see consequences it's never seen. That's called nuclear war. He's threatened a nuclear war if anybody tries to stop him. Are we going to sit back seriously and allow that? Putin's going to start a nuclear war. Okay, well, then if he takes Ukraine, then he moves to the next country and says, and I'll start another nuclear war. Any of you stop me, I launch the nukes. At a certain point, you got to realize Putin won't launch the nukes. Putin won't start a nuclear war because Putin doesn't want to be remembered as the guy who destroyed his own country. He wants to be remembered as the great Russian liberator, the Peter the Great of the 21st century, who rebuilt Russia into the great Russian empire, bigger than the Soviet Union. You can't be remembered as that if you destroyed the world. In fact, you won't be remembered at all because the whole world will be gone. Putin wants a legacy. He wants people to remember him. He wants kids to sing his praises in the future. He wants books written about him. It doesn't happen if you wipe the world out. There's no legacy left because there's nobody to hear it or remember it. Putin's bluffing, and we're scared to call his bluff. And he'll keep doing it till somebody draws a line in the sand. So yes, right now I'm going to make the argument that very few will make. We should put up, well, very few outside of Zelensky, who has pleaded with the West and said, if you truly care about democracy, put up a no-fly zone. Again, quickly, guys, a no-fly zone is simply says, if you fly over this, we shoot you down. So if we put up a no-fly zone and Russia flies a jet in, we shoot the jet down. And Russia would say, you've then started a war, and we will go nuclear. And I'm telling you, we won't. But we're scared. We're scared to do it. And Zelensky's saying, well, if you're really sincere about stopping him, you've got to draw the line. When is enough enough? When he unleashes chemical weapons? What about the nuclear power plant he took over and they immediately armed with weapons? What if he blows the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, which is in the Ukraine, up? What about then? Is then a time to say we should stop him? I'm not saying we should go in and bomb Russia. I'm saying put up a no-fly zone and say, dare you to fly over it. We will shoot you down if you do, but we're going to tell you right now, you can get out of this and we'll give you a negotiated settlement out of this that you can save face. Honestly, it probably means he'd get to keep the couple territories on the eastern side of Ukraine that he basically is annexing. We'd probably have to let that go. Ukraine would probably have to be willing to lose that, but it would be worth it. But we're scared to do no-fly zone. We're scared to truly stand up in the face of evil. We are big talkers, not big walkers. And you can say, Rob, you're crazy. We'd get in a nuclear war. Again, that's the argument people always use. You don't intervene. So if you're in your neighborhood, if people talk about impoverished neighborhoods where there's drug dealing and people get shot, no one wants to talk. And people are like, well, people need to come out and talk. Well, people don't want to talk because they don't want to be next. They don't want to disrupt the balance of power. It's like that everywhere. If your community was being blasted to shreds and the neighboring communities are like, well, we don't want to get involved because then they'll mess with us and we don't want to start that. So sorry, you guys, we feel bad. That's not how the world stays together. It's how we fall apart. And the truth is, Zelensky's right. If the West is serious about this, serious about protecting democracy, look at this country and its people fighting for their lives and put up a wall against Putin and say, we are a united world. Do not fly your planes into this country. You are committing an illegal invasion. You are committing war crimes. You are murdering civilians, and enough is enough. And we dare you to destroy the world over this. And Putin won't destroy the world over this. But I get it. We're too scared. So short of that, we need to do everything else we can and give them more guns, more weapons. And I don't know how long Ukraine can last. I don't know how long they can survive. Russia's got a huge, massive army. And eventually they may just be too much. And then they'll be stuck trying to deal with the Ukrainian people who will not back down, who will not go quietly, who will fight a resistance like you've never seen and make Putin's life miserable. And maybe we'll strangle him out of power, but I wouldn't count on it. We need to step up. And I'm one of the few saying it. We need to step up and step in and call the line on Putin. And that's what we're afraid to do. We're afraid to draw a line in the sand on the guy. And as individuals, as people, I go, get it. We're going, well, it doesn't affect us, but it does affect you. It doesn't affect you immediately, although if you're in Europe, it does. This is just the beginning. He knocks down Ukraine, the chips start falling. It does affect us. It affects us if we really believe all our big talk about democracy, all our big talk about how important democracy is. Look, our country went nuts over January 6th. 20 to 1,000 people ran into the Capitol unarmed and caused mayhem. That's nearly brought the country to its knees. It didn't, but I'm saying worst thing ever. Okay, this is worse. This is a major nation invading in a bigger invasion than we've seen in 80 years and threatening to do anything and everything to destroy this neighboring country, and it won't stop there. If that's not worth standing up for, I don't know what is. And if it was our country, if it was us, I know we have enough weapons and stuff that we could fight back in a way Ukraine can't. But wouldn't you want others to step up and help us? Wouldn't you want people to take a principled stand? And I get it. Those of you say it's not worth risking nuclear war. That's what Putin's betting on, that we won't risk it. We won't call his bluff. And my point is, he won't stop. Any more than Hitler didn't stop. There's a famous Munich summit where Hitler came and met with Chamberlain, the prime minister of Britain at the time. And Chamberlain came back, and headlines all over the news, nationally and internationally, peace for our time, peace for all time. He made peace with Hitler. And, 3 weeks later, a month later, Hitler invades Poland and starts World War II. People like Putin don't stop unless there's a wall in their way and they have to. But Putin won't start a nuclear war over this because Putin doesn't want to destroy the world. Putin wants a legacy. He wants to be remembered. He wants to conquer. Now, as I said, he's going to have to save face somehow. And look, Ukraine might just be able to fight hard enough and long enough. And with all our sanctions and pressure, their economy suffers enough that he decides he needs to negotiate a way out of this in the next few weeks. But the next few weeks, next month are critical. And they need every resource and every help. And I do think we should do a unified no-fly zone. Now, backing up a little bit, just for a point of context, some people out there that want to address the doubters who would say, look, you know what? A lot of people on the left will argue, look, Putin's an imperialist and it's terrible, but the U.S. caused this problem to happen because we knew Ukraine was important to Russia, and we kept dangling the idea that we'd put him in the NATO alliance and make him part of our little military pact. That might be true. That probably is true. We probably should have said, sorry, Ukraine, you can join the European Union, but you can't join NATO because that will simply make Putin go insane and he'll try to invade. And then he'll start a war because then it's NATO and then we will all have to go to war. Maybe we did poke the bear. None of that justifies what he did. And truthfully, in fairness to Ukraine, they have every right to decide their sovereignty. A lot of people don't understand Ukraine. They don't understand. People are always a corrupt nation. It was corrupt. And Zelensky came in and really started to fight against that corruption. They fought for the last 16 years, 17 years to build a democracy. They're fragile and they're doing it. And they elected Zelensky overwhelmingly in a populist democratic election. They're fighting for the things we say we're all about. So we need to give them the support they need. And by the way, Ukraine is a super savvy tech country too. People don't realize that, so much. Ukraine has the highest crypto adoption rate, second highest in the world. El Salvador's first because Bitcoin became legal tender there, so they gave everybody a crypto wallet. So much tech comes out of Ukraine. People are all surprised that Ukraine's like a tech-savvy country. It's super tech-savvy, way more tech-savvy than the U.S. There's all kinds of art, creativity, and technology going on in Ukraine. It's not some backwoods country. Not that would make it okay, but I'm saying I don't even think people realize what Ukraine is. Maybe now more people do. And by the way, speaking of the crypto stuff, because I talk a lot about crypto stuff, the crypto world, this has raised all kinds of questions about the power of cryptocurrency. $60 million in donations were organized and sent directly through crypto wallets to people in Ukraine, causes directly, immediately, in less than a week. I had the people who did it on, and talked about it, at Roundtable, and it was like, it's amazing, like how much they moved so much so fast, and it's powerful. It's direct. War shuts banks down. People can't use banks. Banks go away in the weekend. Crypto went right in, boom, overnight. And Russia will try to use crypto to avoid sanctions, and they're going to try to stop that. So this is actually having a tech implication long term. I talked to some Ukrainians, and one in particular had left Ukraine on a business trip, a tech guy, and he couldn't go back because he lives in Kharkov, which got bombed. And imagine that. You go away and your city gets blasted, your home, your family, your friends. And he said, I'm not discouraged. He's like, we're not going to back down. He's like, people think we'll lose. We won't quit. We won't stop fighting. He's like, the world has underestimated us. Putin has underestimated us. We will fight back, but we need more help. Tall cheesecake. I addressed that point, and I just did. Putin was not just protecting his homeland. That is an egregious misstatement. Putin was protecting his interest as he sees it, which was to have a buffer between him and NATO, which was Ukraine. But Ukraine's an independent country. I said they're like sister countries, but it's a democratically elected independent country. And Putin's an authoritarian dictator, and he doesn't like that. It's not his homeland, but he was concerned about his territory. And I acknowledged we did provoke him. We did push the button. And none of that matters. And if you're on the left and you say it does, you're a hypocrite. Putin is as big an imperialist as you think the U.S. is. He's equally imperialistic and bad in his motives for taking power. And what he did is unjustified, no matter how provoked. You go back and say maybe we should have been more thoughtful. Henry Kissinger wrote a piece about this, like 8 years ago. I recommend you dig it up and find it. It's been republished. He literally predicted this whole thing about how important this was. And if we did this, Putin would invade if he did, if he felt Ukraine was threatened. He called all the shots. He could have written it last week. But that's water under the bridge. Doesn't justify what Putin did. And Putin was going to find a reason to invade anyway. Because as I said, if you look at your history, Putin wants to rebuild the pre-Soviet Russian Empire. So he'll find whatever pretext he needs. He'll find whatever excuse he needs. He's been looking to do this. He's been looking to rebuild. He's getting older. He wants to take more and more and more. Are we going to stand up and stop him? That's the only question you have to ask yourself. How important is it to you? And yes, I know it sucks that gas prices are going up. Oh, by the way, joke to Biden, who says the reason gas prices and prices are going up is because of Russia. I'm sorry. It's been going up for a year. Like, we're at the highest inflation rate, the highest prices in a year. And you're just like suddenly saying it's because of this. And this is going to push them up more. And we should actually open more production and development of our natural resources here, which won't be instant. We should open our reserves, and we should fill the gap. But guys, if we have to deal, and I'm not saying this is not a big deal to deal with high prices and high costs, but that was happening anyway. It wasn't just because of this. It was because of the Biden administration's policies. And we were already in COVID, an inflationary and cost rising mess, price rising mess. But if that's what we have to take, I'll take it. I'll tell you, we're not giving anything compared to what they're giving. It's not just about being a good neighbor and caring about other people, although that on a humanitarian level should be enough. If you cared about protests around here, if you cared about Black Lives Matter, as I said, if you cared about, fighting for voting rights, you ought to care about watching an entire country getting slaughtered. You really should. But even if you don't, you should care about the fact that if you let the ideals that you say are important, if you let the ideals of what democracy is, and I'm not talking about American imperialism, I'm talking about true democracy, people representing being sovereign, being able to choose a government, live the life they want, freely, creatively, independently, without oppression. If you believe in that, you can't just watch as another country train royals, whatever the word is, steamrolls over another country, and it won't stop there. You let it fall, the dominoes will start. How much are you willing to stand up? Tall cheesecake, last point. building bases near the Russian border. I am not defending the U.S. aggressive imperialistic policies, as those on the left like to say. We've made a lot of mistakes in how we've done things. I'm not a fan of NATO expansionism. None of that changes what I just said. Putin would have found an excuse for this no matter what, whether this was it, whatever excuse he needed, he keeps making them. This is not about whether NATO is aggressive as well. It's not about whether we should be less expansionist as well. It's about whether we're going to stand up. And by the way, I just want to be clear. Last note on this. Madison Cawthorn, the Republican congressperson who came out and said Zelensky's a thug and Ukraine's a corrupt government. You know what? Go crawl back in a hole. I'm sorry. That's probably not the right thing to say. But Zelensky's not a thug at all. And if you look at his life and you look at what he's done, he's been pretty transparent. I'm not saying he's not thin-skinned. All politicians are. But he's not far from a thug. He's standing up for something that we all should be proud to stand behind. And is Ukraine corrupt? Yes. And he's actually done a lot to try to deal with that corruption. And, you know, look no farther than here if you want to see. We have a different kind of corruption in our government. It's a more insidious, deeper corruption. But none of that changes the fundamental fact that we're watching a country in live real time be overrun. And not just militarily. They're bombing cities, bombing civilians, destroying art, infrastructure, destroying historic things, and trying to literally suck the people, pound the people into the ground. If that's not worth fighting for, what is? Seriously. All right, that's all I got. Crafty, you want to join me for a minute?
Sure. There you go.
You can see I'm a little passionate about this. And there was a lot to get in there, Crafty. There's a lot. There's so much more I wanted to talk about. I mean, it's humanitarian, there's democracy, you know, it's the post-World War II era, the Cold War. I could go on about this for hours, but, you know, I tried to cover a lot of it. And I think it's important right now. I mean, we've been talking for a long time about our country and our ideals and how, you know, we don't like the fact that we have a lot of people on the right of center think we got a government that's, you know, controlling or whatever. Well, geez, you know. Look at Putin, and he's now steamrolling over someone. So you stand up or not, you know?
Well, we've kind of always known that he's had a short fuse, so it's just like a matter of time when that was going to happen. And you're right, and I totally agree with you, and I hate to say that, but I agree with you. He was just going to find a reason or excuse at one point or another to act upon it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, you know, again, Cheesecake, you know, I get it. You know, I get where you're coming from. I don't agree that the Ukrainians would have started a war with Russia to take back Crimea. I get that it's complex what's going on over there. I think sometimes you have to look beneath the complexity and realize certain complex scenarios, even the imperialistic argument, go away at the end of the day. Putin was going to find a way to do this, and it doesn't matter. What he's done isn't justifiable. It's not justifiable under any scenario. Even if you could justify the invasion, which I can't, you can't justify bombing civilians, bombing hospitals. You're literally trying to take the people out. That's not war. That's called war crimes. And when we've done it, and our country has been accused of doing it and has done it, it's been considered by others to be war crimes. So be consistent. What Putin's doing is war crimes. It's not just war, which is unjustified, which is bad enough. It's literally war crimes, and he won't stop there. But, you know, again, that's just, you know, my view of it. Yeah, I know. Again, I can see the arguments you guys are making. Yes, we manipulated the situation in Libya. If you think that's what this is, you're wrong. Again, I'm going to argue, you guys, don't make excuses. And I've talked to people on the left who absolutely hate American imperialism and hate what we've done. And our very great Eric Dreisel does the Counterpunch podcast, made a great point, which is, I don't care, and he's a hardcore leftist, I don't care how much you hate American imperialism, this is Russian imperialism. And if you defend this, you're a hypocrite. That's him saying it. Like, at the end of the day, this is Russian imperialism. You cannot defend Putin. I mean, you can. Go ahead if you want. Join Madison Cawthorn and be all happy. I don't know if you guys are on the right or the left on this, but to me, there is just no defense. All right, Crafty, I know we've gone a little long. Fun show. I mean, fun is not the right word. Passionate, fun. I can't believe I used the word fun. But I mean, I'm worked up about this, and I care, you know, I really do. And I think we need to stand up, and I'm taking a stand. I'm willing to say, let's put up a line, a no-fly zone, and dare Putin to start a war. He won't do it. He won't do it. Thanks, Cheesecake 5357. I appreciate that.
Rob, I'm going to say I miss this, and I agree with everyone in the chat and with you. It's unfortunate that we have people that are dying, that are caught in the crossfire of all this also as well.
Yeah, and again, and I want to be clear, it's unfortunate for the Russian people that they're suffering right now. I'm not a fan of seeing the Russian people suffer, but there's no other way to end this other than to force Putin. And Putin will hold on for a long time, but this is having repercussions on his political hold on power too. He's not invincible, and he thinks he is, and I think too much of the world thinks he is. But again, I'm going to argue at the end of the day. I always have, Crafty. I've always argued, stand up for what you really believe in. We talk a big talk about believing in this stuff. Now it's time to stand up and prove we mean it, when it's not literally just in our best self-interest, not just in my personal self-interest to fight for this.
Rob, you've been talking about that for years, and look at how many things that you and I have discussed that have actually come to fruition. We should probably do an episode. What did Rob and the show discuss that actually came to be 3 months, 4 months, 6 months later?
Right. Although not exactly. Although I'm not going to sit here right now and take credit for predicting things, although we have done that well a bunch of times. But I will say this, since we're good at predicting things, I'm going to predict that if we don't stop Russia here, you will regret this. And the U.S. will be buffered from it for a long time, but the consequences to the world will be massive, and that will affect us. We are an interdependent world. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. Good to see everybody out there. Good to see you, Crafty. Yeah, we won't be gone for so long this time.